Quorum being present, Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. I ask that all members stand to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Committee is meeting today for consideration of H.R. 5490, the Dismantle Foreign Scam Syndicates Act, H.R. 6297, the Protecting Europe from Anti-Semitic Crime and Extremism Act, H.R. 4291, the Sanctions List Harmonization Act, H.R. 1848, the Houthi Human Rights Accountability Act, H.R. 6347, the Global Child Thrive Reauthorization Act of 2025, H.R. 5021, the American Decade of Sports Act, H.R. 4413, the End Cyprus Embargo Act, H.R. 6230, the Tehran Incitement to Violence Act, H.R. 4397, the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act of 2025, and H.R. 6338, the Stop Illegal Fishing Act. The chair announces that any requests for recorded votes may be rolled, and he may recess the committee at any point without objection. So ordered. Pursuant to House rules, I request that members have the opportunity to submit views for any committee report that may be produced on today's measures without objection. So ordered. Lastly, pursuant to committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements and extraneous materials for the record, subject to length limitations. Without objection. So ordered. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5490. The Dismantle Foreign Scam Syndicates Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 5490, to establish an interagency task force to dismantle and shut down transnational criminal syndicates perpetuating mass online scam operations against Americans.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. Is there any discussion on the bill? I will recognize myself for a couple of minutes here. Thank you. I think this is one of the most important pieces of legislation that we can look at. We deal with a lot of things, Republicans and Democrats, on foreign affairs, but we're not always dealing with things where Americans are actually victims. And when we're talking about these scam syndicates, we are talking about our friends, our neighbors, our family members, people in our community that are very literally victims of people in other countries. And it's a big deal. I want to thank my colleague, Jefferson Shreve, for leading this important piece of legislation. You've done yeoman work on this, and I really appreciate the work. Over the past 3 years, Chinese criminal organizations in Southeast Asia have started online scan operations at an unprecedented scale. These scam centers, they're not a teenager working in their mom's basement. We have some of the pictures of them behind me if you can see them. These are industrialized operations. They are the size of entire apartment complexes, communities. There are hundreds of them, not just one or two of them that operate around the world to go and take advantage of people. They're compounds. They've sprung up across Southeast Asia, in Burma, in Cambodia, in Laos in particular. They're massive. They're, like I said, they often contain thousands of scammers working 24 hours a day. These images behind me, they're 2 large scam centers in Cambodia and Burma. Many people think that, when they hear about these phone scams, like I said, it's just, a one-off or a couple people that are part of a small operation. These are massive, massive operations, often getting their energy and their support from the governments of the countries that they are operating in. They are supported by governments. The reality is these scams, these criminal conducts, these organizations, they are incredibly sophisticated. And by posing as love interests or business associates, they persuade unsuspecting people to deposit their cryptocurrency into fake investment platforms or find other mechanisms to otherwise steal their savings. Think of the unimaginable loss suffered by someone who's been scammed out of their life savings. Since 2023, Americans have lost at least $16 billion at the hands of these scam syndicates and their corrupt governments that protect them. $16 billion in lost savings of hardworking Americans. Americans are being targeted by foreign criminals with some very serious and devastating results. And to make matters worse, these scam centers used forced labor in many cases to run these scams around the clock. Around 300,000 victims of human trafficking are imprisoned inside of these kinds of massive compounds that we show these pictures of. And if they don't hit their quotas, they're tortured, or they're killed, or they're otherwise somehow suffering in an even worse way. Cambodia and Burma are both state sponsors of human trafficking. Government officials in both countries are complicit in this crisis, have already been sanctioned by the United States under both Democrat and Republican administrations. The U.S. government has taken many other strong actions already against these scam centers this year, but there has to be more that's done. This bill crucially codifies an interagency task force and strategy to address this urgent national security threat. And once again, I want to thank my colleague, Jefferson Shreve, for leading this effort, and I strongly support it. Do any other members seek recognition? Are there any amendments? Do you seek recognition, Warren?
I have an amendment also. Chair.
Only on the bill offered by Mr. Shreve.
Okay, so we'll go to the amendment. All right. Do you have an amendment?
Mr. Chairman, firstly, I appreciate the...
1 second, we're going to designate the amendment, I believe. Is that correct? Clerk shall distribute the Shreve amendment in the nature of a substitute.
The amendment has been distributed by electronic device.
Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5490, offered by Mr. Shreve. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the
Without
following.
objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Representative Shreve is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I appreciate the vigorous introduction of 5490. Since taking office in January, I've heard from Hoosiers across my district in Indiana, sharing the constant stream of scam calls and texts that they've received. I've experienced the same myself. Many are small speed cam or toll road scams, and many much greater in magnitude and the scope of service. These schemes have grown increasingly sophisticated, and they are certain to spiral up in sophistication, often nearly impossible to discern from real traffic. Authentically, I didn't fully understand where these scams originated when I investigated this issue earlier this year. What I learned is that many scams from these massive industrial scale scam centers operate in countries such as Burma, Laos, Cambodia, where corruption and instability has allowed these criminal operations to flourish. Under the military junta, Burma has become the global hub of the multi-billion-dollar scamming industry, with an estimated 120,000 scammers generating about $15 billion annually. In Cambodia, corrupt officials allow scam centers to operate openly, raking in roughly $12 billion a year, which we'd estimate about half of their GDP. China plays a central role in the rise of this industry. Chinese state-owned enterprises have used the Belt and Road Initiative contracts to construct these massive scam compounds in these countries, where human trafficking has forced countless souls into scamming operations under threat of torture. The impact on Americans, on my constituents, on Mr. Zinke's constituents, on Mr. Castro's constituents is simply staggering. The FBI reports that Americans lost, as the chairman just noted, roughly $17 billion to scams in 2024, with Indiana being the second most targeted state per capita. This means real-world impacts for everyday Americans, my constituents and my colleagues. Families lose their homes, retirees see their savings vanish overnight, and countless innocent victims are left with little to nothing. My Dismantling Foreign Syndicates Act establishes an interagency task force chaired by our Secretary of State to dismantle and shut down the transnational criminal syndicates perpetuating mass online scam operations. Simply put, it protects trusting Americans from sophisticated scams. This government-wide task force will investigate and respond to the Chinese Communist Party's involvement, build the capacity of trusted law enforcement partners, harness offensive cyber capabilities, and convene a coalition of like-minded foreign allies and partners to combat transnational criminal organizations. These criminal scammers inflict untold misery by stealing billions from hardworking Americans and countless folks abroad, and traffic hundreds of thousands of victims globally. This is not just a consumer protection bill. It's a matter of national security and human rights, and we as members of Congress must respond. I encourage all of my committee colleagues to support this bipartisan bill. I yield the remainder of my time. And Mr. Chairman, if I may speak directly then to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
You were just speaking. We recognized your amendment, and you were speaking on the
All right,
amendment just now. So you still have a minute remaining if you want to speak.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the Chair and Ranking Member Meeks for working with me and my team on the amendment to ensure we produce strong bipartisan support on the issue of this fundamentally nonpartisan bill. While this amendment preserves many of the core elements of the original bill, it removes a specific list of individuals from the sanctions section. I want to be clear, the removal of this list does not mean individuals named are model citizens. Since the bill was introduced, the Treasury Department has already sanctioned several of the individuals previously listed. This includes the Prince Group, Chenzi, Ingdara, and others. Now, I look forward to continuing to work with both the Chair and Ranking Member to ensure the administration evaluates whether each additional individual on the list meets the statutory criteria for the imposition of sanctions. I urge support of the amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support Representative Shreve's A&S, and I want to thank him, as well as you, Chairman, for working with me to come to an agreement on this important bill. PRC-linked scam centers have spread across Southeast Asia, exploiting instability, corruption, and weak governance in Cambodia, Laos, and conflict-torn Burma. These are mammoth compounds containing thousands of people, many of whom have been forced into this work. These compounds have become a hotbed of all kinds of transnational crime, human trafficking, narcotics trafficking, money laundering, and much, much more. This is now a $40 billion industry and is growing fast. These scams cost Americans more than $10 billion last year alone, shattering families and, in too many cases, the tragic loss of life. Enough is enough. We need to send a message to these Chinese criminal networks that they cannot continue stealing from the American people with impunity or enslaving and torturing these workers. I was disappointed that the majority removed the provision that would authorize $60 million in funding needed to carry out the kinds of programming the bill calls for, countering scam centers, bolstering law enforcement cooperation, and protecting the victims of trafficking and forced criminality. Still, this bill will help. It will help protect Americans, and it will clamp down on these PRC-backed operations that are destabilizing the entire region. Therefore, I urge all of my colleagues to support this A&S, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Mr. Davidson.
I move to strike the last word, and I want to speak in support of Mr. Shreve's bill. This is a great bill. As chairman of National Security and Illicit Finance, these scam centers have become one of the central focuses in the House Financial Services Committee as well as here on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And these are transnational criminal organizations, and the threat they pose, I think, is accurately captured by the spirit of the bill, by the messages in support of it. And frankly, I haven't found a gap anywhere on this issue. I think this may be one of the most unifying things in Congress So that's refreshing. It's hard to find issues like that. And so I congratulate you for this bill, Mr. Shreves. I urge all our colleagues to support it. I mean, just in October, the largest seizure ever by the Department of Justice, over 127,000 Bitcoin from a scam center in Cambodia. That's over $15 billion seized. And it was, by a guy who's still at large, Chen Xi, who's the founder of Cambodian conglomerate Prince Holding Group. He was charged in Brooklyn. And I think the thing that, has been stated by Mr. Shreves and now Mr. Meeks that can't be stated enough, the scam itself is bad. There are people who are being defrauded, and you have individual cases that are overwhelming our state and local law enforcement because it might be 50,000 here, 20,000 there, or $1 million in another place. But when you add it all up, the scope for America last year was over 10 billion. The scope around the world is huge. And the exploitation doesn't stop with the victims of the scam. Overwhelmingly, the people operating the scams are captured. They're slave labor, and they earn their freedom, maybe, if they scam enough people. This is a horrific situation for everyone that's involved. And I think the scary thing here is you have nation-state sponsors where significant portions of some of these countries, a significant portion of their GDP comes from illicit activity. And we need to make it clear that the priority for the United States is we view you as co-conspirators with the operators of these scam centers. You're holding people captive. You better never consider holding an American captive, but we're not indifferent to other captives either. So we should liberate all these people who are being held in slave labor conditions, and they're being tortured beyond that because they know they're stealing the life savings from innocent victims. In this case in Cambodia, it was a pig butchering scheme. That means that they don't just steal the money once, they build a relationship, they establish rapport and trust, and they go for the bigger score in a long-term play. It's a very devious action. And here's the other thing. Sometimes in the U.S., it's tempting to go after, say, the bank that sent the wire transfer. Well, the bank did what you said. If you're the client and you're being scammed, it's a horrific situation for the bank too, because you have, say a grandma who's being scammed out of $50,000. She goes to the bank and says, "No, I really want you to send this money to this address." They do all the safeguards, and we have some, but sometimes they still say, "Yeah, I want you to send the wire," and they do it, and then people are mad at the bank, and I understand why you should be mad, because you were just robbed. But the direction here needs to be laser focused on the perpetrators of the scam, because the banks are victimized too. This happens with crypto, Bitcoin ATMs. How did they get 127,000 Bitcoin? They found people to go deposit cash in a Bitcoin ATM. And the Bitcoin ATM operator also does some screening. Are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure this is where you want the money to go? And they provide a service. Now, they charge for the service, just like banks charge for the service. And the customer says, "Yeah, that's what I really want to do." And they do it. Well, the ATM operator did the service you contracted them to do. I understand why you would be mad if you're the victim of this, but let's be clear, the real perpetrator of this, in this case, in the charge sheet anyway, is Chen Xi and Prince Holding Group in Cambodia. But there are tons of these things around the world, and I think we're right to target them with a whole-of-government approach. The federal government also needs to be a better resource for state and local governments to organize the effort here, and we're working on that in our committee. So for everyone that wants to have input on that, please reach out to our staff, because we're working on a financial services product that complements it. I urge everyone to support it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Yep. Representative McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, am proud to join in support of my colleague, Representative Shreves' Dismantle Foreign Scam Syndicates Act. This bipartisan bill would provide the U.S. government with tools to effectively target foreign criminal organizations that prey on Delawareans and many Americans by scamming them out of their hard-earned money. These scams are well known to everyone. I just received a scam call on my way here in the Capitol. Not only are we all tired of annoying calls and texts, but these criminal organizations truly prey on the most vulnerable in our society, especially the elderly, all as has been mentioned while trafficking innocent people to do their dirty work. According to the FTC, Delawareans lost more than $34 million to scams in 2024, and this problem is only getting worse. I'm glad to see that Democrats and Republicans can come together to find solutions to problems like this one that all of our constituents share. This bill will improve coordination with our allies around the world, identify and hold these nefarious actors accountable, and establish a framework to assist Americans in recovering their stolen assets. We must ensure that Delawareans and all Americans are not scammed out of their hard-earned living. As a member of the bipartisan Stop Scams Caucus, I believe this bill will improve the lives of my constituents and all Americans, and I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance
Any
of my
other
time.
members seek recognition?
Yeah, amendment on the ANS.
One moment. Nobody else seeks recognition? Very good. Being no further discussion, do any other members wish to offer an amendment to the Shreve Amendment in the nature of a substitute?
I
Representative.
have amendment number 75 to ANS.
Clerk shall distribute the amendment. Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 5490, offered by Mr. Castro of Texas. Insert after Section 8 the following section. Section 9, satellite imagery access to monitor human rights abuses related to scam centers in Southeast Asia. Access to satellite imagery, the Secretary of State is authorized to provide to non-governmental organizations and research institutions access to current and archival high-resolution satellite imagery for the purposes of monitoring and documenting human rights abuses related to the operation of online scam centers in Southeast Asia. Report.
Without
not-
objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Representative is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Representative Shreve, for authoring this important legislation. Just as across the country, there are many in Texas who get scammed on all sorts of different kinds of phone calls and texts and outreach over the internet and lose in Texas probably hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So thank you for this legislation. And quite honestly, it's the kind of thing I wish we spent more time in Congress working on, things that really affect all of our constituents. So this legislation takes long overdue action to confront a disturbing and fast-growing threat. Transnational criminal syndicates, often backed by Chinese networks, running massive scam compounds in Southeast Asia. These operations defraud Americans out of billions of dollars, launder illicit funds across borders, and rely on the forced labor of human trafficking victims to operate. It's a toxic convergence of cyber fraud, human trafficking, and state corruption, and demands a whole-of-government response. And I strongly support the creation of a U.S. interagency task force and the strategic tools that this bill provides, including sanctions, law enforcement cooperation, and support for trafficking survivors. But we must also make sure that abuses don't go unseen. That's why I'm offering an amendment that directs the State Department to expand access to satellite imagery for researchers and NGOs documenting human rights violations at these scam centers. These compounds are often remote, fortified, and shielded from press or outside monitors. But from space, we can track their construction, monitor activity patterns, and support investigators working to expose atrocities. This approach has been highly effective in trafficking human rights abuses in Xinjiang, North Korea, Sudan, and in Southeast Asia. With this amendment, we can provide the human rights community with tools to document and report abuses that would otherwise remain secret. Under this legislation, the State Department would reserve the ability to decide when and with whom the satellite imagery will be shared. I urge my colleagues to support both the underlying bill and my amendment. Let's send a clear message. The United States will not turn a blind eye to modern slavery, digital predation, and the exploitation of vulnerable people across borders. I yield back, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Recognize myself for a moment. I thank you for your amendment. I support your amendment. And I think it's a good addition to working to deal with this problem where Americans are very specifically targeted. Obviously, others across the world are targeted as well, but we're dealing with a situation where our constituents, our friends, our neighbors, our family members are targeted in any which way that somebody can get a hold of them, via text, via email, via probably snail mail, anything that they can do to get a hold of somebody and scam them, steal their money. Just want to say I look forward to continuing to work with you, Representative Shreve, and Representative Meeks, and Representative Castro, and anybody else that wants to work on this issue. It's very worthy of our time. And do any other members seek recognition? Representative Shreve, Representative Meeks, go ahead.
I support Representative Castro's amendment. Civil society and research organizations can be a critical partner and force multiplier for the United States interests and values if we support them in helping document human rights abuses and scam center operations in Southeast Asia. In the past, the State Department has provided NGOs access to high-frequency, high-resolution satellite imagery to document human rights abuses in specific conflict zones around the world. Doing so in this case of scam centers, as this amendment authorizes, would enable civil society partners to track and expose scam center operations and document human trafficking, forced labor, and other human rights abuses. This is a sensible and straightforward thing to do. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking member yields back. Representative Self.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a question of my colleague. The original bill had a total authorization of $60 million. I believe that the ANS strips that out. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
Thank you. I yield back.
You're welcome. Any other members seek recognition? Representative Shreve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I simply want to thank Representative Castro for offering this amendment. Quite simply, it makes this bill better and stronger, and I urge adoption and yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment offered by Representative Castro. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments? None. There being no further amendments, the question now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Shreve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 5490 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, may I request a recorded vote?
You may request a roll call vote. A roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. That vote will be postponed. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 6297, the Protecting Europe from Anti-Semitic Crime and Extremism Act. The bill was circulated in advance, so the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 6297, to require the Department of State to provide briefings on anti-Semitism in Europe.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. Without objection, the fine amendment in the nature of a substitute circulated to members in advance shall be considered as read and will be treated as original text for the purpose of the amendment. I now recognize myself for a couple of minutes. Thank you. Anti-Semitism and international terrorism in Europe, they are very real threats. They undermine regional stability, transatlantic security, and safety of the American citizens living and traveling abroad. For instance, after October 7, Hamas' barbaric attack in Israel, France experienced over 1,000 anti-Semitic incidents in just 1 month that were reported. That doesn't count all the ones that went unreported. While Germany saw over a 240% increase. These numbers show the rapid escalation of anti-Semitic violence and the spread of international terrorism. Some more recent additional examples illustrate this trend. October 2, 2025, a deadly anti-Semitic attack at Manchester Synagogue during Yom Kippur killed 2 and injured 2 others. In March 2025, a 22-year-old was arrested in Madrid for attempting to set fire to the Riman Kosher, a busy kosher restaurant. Authorities charged him with anti-Semitic hate crime, and attempted murder, and arson. This bill, it builds upon the Trump administration's efforts to confront anti-Semitism and strengthen counterterrorism abroad. It ensures continued U.S. diplomatic engagement with European allies and requires regular consultations with Congress. I want to thank my colleague, the sponsor of this bill, Representative Fine, for his leadership on this issue, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Is there any further discussion? Representative Fine, you are recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for agendaing this bill to be heard today. One would have thought that October 7th would have resulted in less anti-Semitism in the world. The world's worst attack against Jews since the Holocaust, more Jews dying on any day since the Holocaust, one would have thought would have created an outpouring of sympathy and a heightened need to deal with anti-Semitism. But in Europe, that is not what happened, as the chairman so aptly described. A study conducted by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights recorded an increase of 400% in anti-Semitism since October 7th, 2023. 96% of European Jews, effectively all of them, it said they encounter anti-Semitism in their daily lives. Now, I can give statistic after statistic after statistic, but I think it is more useful to reflect upon the actual stories of what has happened, to marvel at the fact in 2023, in 2024, and in 2025, we can see the likes that we have not seen since the 1930s in Europe. On November 8th, 2024, in Amsterdam, there was a pogrom, what they called a Jew hunt, where dozens of Israeli soccer fans were chased through Amsterdam by a mob of over 100 people screaming, "Free Palestine." In November of 2024, in Berlin, 13-year-old boys from a Jewish soccer team, 13-year-old children, were pursued by adult men yelling, "Free Palestine." In Milan, in September of 2025, assailants unleashed a vicious dog on a group of visibly Orthodox Jews. In September of 2025, feces was smeared on Jewish sites in England. In November of 2025, an Israeli victims' memorial in Rome was defaced. In July of 2025, 50 French Jewish children were kicked off of an airplane in Spain after one uttered simply a Hebrew word. So this is a real problem. But for those who believe this does not simply this only affects Europeans, it affects Americans as well. Less than 1 month ago, on October 10th, 2025, a Pakistani Muslim, while screaming Allahu Akbar, attacked an American in Milan, Italy, for having the crime of simply looking Orthodox because of his attire. Anti-Semitism is real. It is on the rise, accompanied by the rise of mainstream Islam in Europe, and it is something that we must deal with to protect not only Jews, but to protect all Americans wherever they may be. This bill directs the State Department to address that growing threat of anti-Semitism, to make clear to our European allies that the conduct that they have allowed to take place within their countries is simply unacceptable. After this assessment, the Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs will engage with those countries that are identified as countries of apparent concern and ask for their cooperation in countering this rising anti-Semitism, and it will require those individuals to provide a briefing to both our committee and our Senate counterpart to make sure we are up to date on what these European countries are doing. But make no mistake, and let me say this loudly and clearly, what these European countries have allowed to take place in their countries is unacceptable. And we should be warned that where anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, societal collapse soon comes thereafter. That's what we've seen in 3,000 years of anti-Semitism around the world. So I again want to thank the chairman for bringing this bill up, for making it a priority, for allowing us to say to our friends in Europe that what they have allowed is simply unacceptable and that we in the United States will be watching. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this bill and the ANS that follows, I assume. Acts of anti-Semitism are definitively on the rise globally. This is certainly true in Europe, where the rise of fringe political movements, particularly far-right groups, are increasingly picking up steam and hearkening back to unacceptable political rhetoric of old. And in other contexts, debates about or criticisms of the policies and conduct of the government of Israel in Gaza and the West Bank have been manipulated and used as excuses for hateful acts against Jews around the world. Combating anti-Semitism has been, is, and will always be a priority for me. And our voices must be heard. Not just voices of those that might have Jewish heritage, but voices of all human beings. We cannot tolerate a world where hate and anti-Semitism resides. This should be true for any Democratic and or Republican administration. It should be a central element of the United States foreign policy forever. This bill calls for the State Department to assess the threat of anti-Semitism in Europe and requires consultation with Congress on addressing these threats. And therefore, I strongly support this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking Member yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Very good. Representative Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing we know is that anti-Semitism in Europe is not new. It dates back many, many centuries, and as my colleague on the other side said, it doesn't end with the Jews, it starts with the Jews all too often. My grandmother was born in Kyiv in the early 1900s. Her family, her parents and her 4 siblings at the time left because of the pogroms attacking the Jewish community. In 2015, I went to Paris shortly after the bombing of the Hypercacher supermarket in Charlie Hebdo, or the attack on the Hypercacher market in Charlie Hebdo, and spoke with the Jewish community in Europe, in Paris, and their concerns, and we've seen that only rise. In fact, anti-Semitism in Europe is rising once again to levels that endanger Jewish communities all across the continent, destabilizing our closest allies and threatening transatlantic institutions. Section 2 of this bill directs the Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs to assess that the threat and engage diplomatically with governments where the danger is most acute. That is a basic oversight function, something Congress should always be doing. But the context matters here. This legislation would not be necessary if the Trump administration had not spent the past year gutting and destroying the civilian institutions that detect, track, and counter violent extremism. Freezing assistance, hollowing out USAID, dismantling the State Department's capacity to analyze trends in anti-Semitism. These are choices, and these choices create blind spots that the extremists are using to exploit. When the administration undermines independent institutions at home while ignoring anti-Semitism abroad, Congress has an obligation to step in. This bill does something narrow but important. It restores a channel of structured consultation between the State Department and Congress, ensuring we receive honest reporting on the threats that Europe is struggling to contain. It also signals that protecting Jewish communities is not an optional diplomatic task. It is core to transatlantic security, and the executive branch must be held accountable for delivering on that responsibility. I support the bill, and I appreciate the effort to keep it tightly focused on oversight rather than political theater. The fight against anti-Semitism requires competent institutions, sustained diplomacy, and seriousness of purpose. This legislation helps move us back into that direction. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? There being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 6297 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Mr. Wilson.
I'd like to request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. A roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. Thank you. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 4291, the Sanctions List Harmonization Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 4291, to require a review of whether individuals or entities subject to the imposition of certain sanctions through inclusion on certain sanctions lists should also be subject to the imposition of other sanctions and included on other sanctions lists.
Without objection, first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. And I now recognize myself for a statement. The executive branch has various blacklists for foreign adversary entities that are threats to the United States national security. It is critically important that agencies are coordinating to ensure that foreign adversary entities are not slipping through the gaps. This bill ensures foreign adversaries are not evading penalties by requiring agencies to share information with each other in a timely manner and review each other's respective blacklists. Put simply, this bill ensures that all interagency sanctions officials are on the same page and working with the same information. This bill is both basic good governance and critical for American national security. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Fine, for leading this important legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support its passage. Is there any further discussion? Ranking Member Meeks.
I support this measure. It is imperative that our federal agencies share information effectively. This bill will ensure that once an agency adds an entity to its sanctions list, all other agencies are conducting timely reviews to determine whether that entity warrants inclusion on their lists as well. While I believe agencies are informally doing this work already, codifying the need to conduct timely reviews is a reasonable step. It is critical that the various lists this bill is trying to harmonize remain distinct. Why? Because each list serves a different policy purpose. We need smart and effective policies, not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to economic statecraft, and especially our competition with China. In some cases, financial sanctions are the right response. In others, we may want to keep the PRC reliant on U.S. exports and reinvest in the revenue into maintaining our innovation and technological edge. And there are circumstances where we must restrict the export of advanced technology to a particular entity, even though its actions do not justify financial sanctions. Our sanctions are designed not just to be punitive, but to have a policy impact. This bill allows each agency to retain the flexibility to focus on the objectives of its own list, while also ensuring that no problematic entity gets overlooked. And so I support this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking Member yields back. Is there any further discussion? Representative Fine.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for also hearing this bill. This is a great example of, I think, where the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. So to put it in clear perspective, 3 of our government agencies, the Department of War, the Treasury Department, and the Commerce Department, all look for bad guys that we shouldn't be doing business or working with, yet they don't necessarily talk to each other. Between these three agencies, there are 6 separate lists. And lest someone ask, well, of course they're talking and they're making sure. As of June of 2023, 7 companies were on both 2 of the lists, but not on the Department of War list. 1 company was not on a different agency list, and there were 57 companies on 2 lists, but not a third. What this bill does is say if one of our federal agencies identifies a harmful Chinese actor, a terrorist, or these other reasons why we should not be working with them, that the other agencies monitoring and creating these lists should at least be forced to go through the process of taking a look at whether they should be on their own. It doesn't mandate them to do it, but if they choose to disagree with the views of their partner agency, they have to justify the reasons for doing that. If you have been ranked someone that should be a specially designated national by the Treasury Department because you're a bad guy, you probably ought to be on the other lists. If you're someone who can't buy military end user equipment because of the Commerce Department, the Department of War should probably know that. If you're part of the PRC's military company list of the Department of War, the Treasury Department should probably have you on the Chinese military industrial complex list. This is a common sense bill that's going to streamline these multiple efforts to go after bad actors in the world. I think this will make a material effect in keeping us safe and in holding bad actors responsible. And again, I appreciate the chairman for bringing the bill forward today.
Representative yields back. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I'd move to strike the last word. I just want to thank the gentleman for bringing this. For decades, we have had a problem in the federal government of bad actors moving from one place to the other. And often it's in fact a new corporation, a new name, and you have to look into the board, you have to look into the people behind it, or even sometimes to the address. The reality is that for years we have been pushing administration after administration. Your effort actually creates the requirement to look at it, and thus the requirement to create interactive databases that will look at name, location, other activities that would allow someone to realize that it's not the identical same, but a similar. And I think going that far and even further, you're starting today, and I really appreciate your work and will be supporting the bill. I yield back.
Vice Chair yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none, there being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 4291, not amended, to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a recorded vote on that.
Recording vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 1848, the Houthi Human Rights Accountability Act. This bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 1848, to authorize the imposition of sanctions with respect to the Houthis and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point, and I recognize myself in support of this bill. We frequently talk about the threat that Houthis pose to international shipping in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, but this bill highlights another very important issue: the Houthis' ongoing campaign of brutal violence within Yemen itself, that they use to maintain complete control over what would be otherwise innocent Yemenis. As we speak, the Houthis are working to recruit and indoctrinate a new generation of terrorists through their summer camps and schools, creating the next wave of enemies. The Houthis' campaign to impose extremist and anti-Semitic worldviews on Yemeni Houthis youths poses a grave long-term threat to regional stability and requires urgent attention. They are also manipulating the delivery of humanitarian aid and detaining international aid workers. They have detained U.S. Embassy locally employed staff for years. This bill would impose sanctions on Houthi members found responsible for human rights abuses and their arbitrary detention of U.S. staff. It would also introduce key oversight mechanisms to ensure Houthi leaders continue to be held accountable. If we do not stop this at the root, the Houthis will continue to pose a direct and long-term threat to the regional stability and U.S. national security. I urge my colleagues to support this important bill that will help ensure the Houthis are held to account for their hostage-taking and human rights abuses. And I want to thank my colleague, Representative Issa, for working to advance this bipartisan piece of legislation, his work in the region and his work as the vice chair. And in that, I end my time. And does anybody else seek recognition? Representative Issa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you aptly said, this is a bipartisan bill with my colleague from California, Mr. Sherman. And I just want to share in support of the bill some recognition of what Yemen was before the Houthis. I was on Codels that went to the region, went to Yemen, and saw a country that was poor, that had huge problems, including drug trafficking and the like. But I also visited the Jewish quarter, purchased jewelry made there, some of it looking ancient, some of it, in fact, brand new. There was a thriving community with synagogues and a tolerance of their people for their fellow man and their fellow Yemenis. That was before the Houthis. Since that time, they have destroyed the ability to be anything other than what they want you to be. They have imposed Sharia law. They have, in fact, as the chairman said, used this as a base to shell and destroy commerce as best they could. They are a proxy for Iran's expansive Shia-dominated disruptive influence. But most importantly, their human rights violations cannot go without our attention. So as we make the sea safe again, as we do what we need to do against specific militants, it is important that we recognize that just as Hamas is a destabilizing influence on the possibility of an Abraham Accord that will make the region free of conflict, just as we know Hezbollah is a cancer on the society of Lebanon and anywhere else it touches, the Houthis' activities have to be dealt with. And using existing global sanction capability, and expanding it to the Houthis, I believe we can put the kind of pressure and administration after administration rule leading from Congress. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your earlier words, and again, remind people that this is one on which people on both sides of the aisle broadly agree that we have to help Yemen become the country that it once was, and then take it to what it could be. And with that, I yield back.
Vice Chair yields back. Is there any further discussion? There being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the bill at the desk.
The clerk shall distribute the amendment in the nature of a substitute, number 99.
The amendment has been distributed by electronic device.
Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1848, offered by Mr. Issa of California.
Without objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. My notes had said that I was introducing the amendment, the bill as an amendment in the nature of a substitute. But now this is a small technical correction, but it is significant to allow it to comply with being included in the broader bill. It simply removes USAID language from it, which is moot at this point. and makes the bill one that can go forward as part of a package. And with that, I urge support for the amendment and yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support Mr. Iss's bill because we must continue to call attention to the unnecessary and unjust suffering of Yemeni civilians at the hands of the Houthi movement. Millions of Yemenis are experiencing persistent food scarcity, reoccurring disease, and medical goods shortage because of illegal restrictions imposed on aid by the Houthis. The Houthis continue to leverage life-saving aid while enforcing oppressive policies on women, employ child soldiers, and arbitrarily detain aid workers and political opponents. This bill draws attention to these abusive practices through 3 reporting requirements that will help us better understand the Houthi efforts to block humanitarian assistance and the extent of their ongoing human rights abuses. This legislation also requires determinations on whether the global Magnitsky or Levinson Act sanctions for gross human rights abuses and hostage-taking are warranted. We must continue to hold the Houthis accountable for their opposition and their oppression of the Yemeni civilians. So I want to thank Mr. Issa and my colleagues for bringing the attention to these issues, and I urge all of us to support this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking Member yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? There being no further discussion, do any members wish to offer an amendment to the ISA amendment in the nature of a substitute? There being no further amendments, the question now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Issa. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the amendment is agreed to. Thank you. There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 1848 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion is agreed to. Representative requests a recorded vote. A roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 6347, the Global Child Thrive Reauthorization Act of 2025. The bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 6347, to reauthorize the Global Child Thrive Act of 2020 and for other purposes.
Without objection, first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to an amendment at any point, and I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Under the Biden administration, I could say a lot about foreign assistance, but I don't believe most of it made America safer, stronger, or more prosperous. Much of it did not reach those in need. Instead, it was caught up in overhead costs of bloated NGOs, and it never left the Beltway. This has been an ongoing problem through administration after administration, where support intended to go out simply stays within the Beltway. This bill reauthorizes a special advisor appointed by Secretary Rubio to streamline life-saving assistance and ensure that it actually reaches the vulnerable. I thank my colleague, Mr. Castro, for leading the legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Is there any further discussion? Ranking Member Meeks.
I strongly support Mr. Castro's bill. This bill reauthorizing the Global Child Thrive Act for 5 years. The original legislation brought together expertise from across the United States foreign assistance spectrum to ensure that our programs prioritize the healthy development of children between birth and 8 years of age. This includes incorporating elements of health, nutrition, water, early learning, basic education, and child protection as we design approaches to help children do just what the bill title says, thrive. This reauthorization is particularly important after the Trump administration's unlawful dismantling of USAID and drastic cuts to foreign assistance programs across the board. By voting for this bill with strong bipartisan support, this committee can demonstrate to the administration and to the world that the United States of America still cares deeply about child development and understands its importance to our own prosperity and security. So I want to thank Representative Castro for championing the Global Child Thrive Act, and I look forward to seeing these important programs continue and for the United States of America to stand up for the world's children. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking member yields back. I would remind him that everything the Trump administration has done to roll USAID under to the purview of the Secretary has been entirely legal and really an outstanding effort to make sure that dollars go where they intend to do the most good instead of having programs that are wasteful and do things like transgender job fairs and drag shows and things like that that are absolute wastes of our dollars. In that, do any other members seek recognition? Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unlawful dismantling of USAID. We hear that often. If that is the case, then I expect to see a referral to the Justice Department by my colleagues on the other side. Let's stop talking about it. Put your actions where your words are. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Castro, recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. 5 years ago, Democrats and Republicans came together to pass the Global Child Thrive Act and made early childhood development a core pillar of America's foreign assistance. We recognize that if we want safer, more prosperous societies, we have to start by helping children thrive. Today, we're renewing that commitment. The Global Child Thrive Reauthorization Act of 2025 does three simple but essential things. First, it directs the Secretary of State to appoint the Special Advisor for Assistance to Orphans and Vulnerable Children. This doesn't create a new position. Existing law has already established this position and provided the Secretary of State with the authority to appoint someone to the role. This bill requires the Secretary to exercise that authority. Second, the legislation requires the State Department to issue new implementing directives for the Global Child Thrive Act. In 2020, the Congress required the State Department to integrate early childhood development into foreign assistance programs. Given the significant changes to U.S. foreign assistance programs over the last year, including the effective closure of USAID, it's important that new directives are issued to implement the legislation. And finally, the bill extends the authorization for the Global Child Thrive Act through 2030, ensuring that our long-term development work remains stable and predictable. I'm grateful to Representatives McCormick, Olszewski, and Fitzpatrick for joining me in this bipartisan effort. And we may disagree on many things in this committee, but we should all agree that investing in children early, intentionally, and consistently makes the United States safer and strengthens our partnerships around the world. I urge my colleagues to support this reauthorization and to join us in ensuring that American leadership continues to give the world's most vulnerable children a fair chance in life. With that, I yield back, Chairman.
Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Olszewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin this morning by recognizing Representatives Castro, McCormick, and Fitzpatrick for their partnership and their leadership on this critical effort. I'm proud to help lead this bipartisan bill that will strengthen the implementation of policies that advance early childhood development around the world. Every child deserves the chance to grow, to learn, and to reach their full potential, no matter where they are born. The Global Child Thrive Act was a landmark bill that, for the first time, put this belief at the heart of America's work around the world. As a father and former public school teacher, I come to this work believing that every policy issue is a children's issue. And I believe that because I've seen firsthand what's at stake for our children. I saw poverty, food insecurity, and limited access to health care hold children back. But I also saw what happened when we believed in our young people, having teachers who fight for them, communities that uplift them, and a government that prioritizes their needs. What I saw in my classroom is no different than the challenges and opportunities that children are now experiencing around the globe. Today, more than 400 million children, more than 1 in 5, live in poverty and face devastating consequences to their health and to their development. 250 million children under the age of 5 are at risk of not fulfilling their development potential. We must do everything possible to ensure that every child, everywhere, can meet their development milestones and thrive. This work is urgent, and children are counting on us to show up for them. They cannot flood our inboxes or hire lobbyists. They cannot light up a phone bank and advocate on their own behalf, but still, they need us. So again, I thank my colleagues for their leadership on this effort, and I urge them to support the reauthorization of the Global Child Thrive Act to help build healthier societies, to reduce poverty, and advance America's values and security for years to come. Because when we invest in children, we invest in our future. With that, Mr. Chairman, I say thank you, and I yield back.
Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this legislation, H.R. 6347. It will reauthorize the Global Child Thrive Act of 2020 for 5 more years. It directs the Secretary of State to appoint a special advisor for assistance to orphans and vulnerable children, and requires a new set of implementing directives given the massive changes to our foreign assistance apparatus since the bill's initial passage, namely the dissolution of USAID. I'm delighted to see the bipartisan support for important foreign assistance work supporting early childhood development, and I commend my colleagues on advancing this bill forward. However, I would be remiss if I did not take the time and the opportunity to highlight the ground that has been lost in implementing this bipartisan priority due to this administration's reckless destruction of USAID. Investing in early childhood development not only saves lives, but strengthens economies and promotes stability, making us all safer, making us all stronger. This year, the administration cut 83% of our foreign assistance programs, including life-saving programs supporting maternal and child health and nutrition. An independent peer-reviewed study published in Lancet projected 14 million additional deaths by 2030 due to the USAID cuts, including more than 4.5 million children under 5 years old. Dr. Atwood Gwande, who served in the Biden administration as the Assistant Administrator for Global Health at USAID, wrote in November 5th New Yorker article that it is estimated that, quote, USAID's dismantling has already caused the deaths of 600,000 people, 2/3 of them children. A 10-month estimate. 600,000 people, 2/3 children. This administration has justified these massive cuts by making unsubstantiated claims of waste, fraud, and abuse. And yet, more than 95% of USAID work has never come under contention. I'm not talking about the drag show example. 95% of this work has never come under contention. While aspects of USAID could be inefficient, that's our job to figure out how to make this more efficient and make sure every resource goes to the right cause. As I have said before, I fundamentally disagree with this administration's devaluation of foreign assistance, and I call upon this committee, Mr. Chairman, this committee, our committee, to reverse this deadly demonization and destruction of USAID. It is a key arm of our foreign policy toolkit that contributes to our safety, security, and economic prosperity. It is a crucial component of our soft power. And I will add a personal note, if you'll indulge me. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, we were blessed with the birth of our 7th grandchild. Yay. Thank you. Thank you. And she came to us, it was a struggled pregnancy, and she came to us premature. And she is in excellent care in a NIC unit, receiving the nutrition and the maternal care that my daughter-in-law needs. And I can't help but thinking, every single time I visit or I think of them, what would have happened had this baby come into the world in an area that USAID was cut off? Would she get the nutrition, the maternal assistance, needed to have this baby live, thrive, and grow old. This administration's cut of USAID, I think, is immoral. And we, this committee, must be at the forefront of restoring that aid. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back in support of this bill, H.R. 6347, and I seek unanimous consent.
Representative yields back. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would comment additionally, though, and that's simply to say, if you're upset about this, point your anger where it needs to be directed. And that's at the Democrat Party, Secretary Blinken,
It's called democratic.
President Biden.
It's an adjective.
Yeah.
Democratic Party.
Point your anger where it belongs. Those that were coming up with wasteful, abusive programs like drag shows in Ecuador, transgender operas, transgender plays, transgender musicals,
As you sit by
transgender
and
job fairs in
600,000
Bangladesh
people have
for
died.
$800,000. All of the waste and abuse that we brought receipts for. Direct your anger where it belongs. Go look in the mirror. Do any other members seek
I
recognition?
seek unanimous consent, sir.
No other members seek
I
recognition.
seek
Well,
unanimous
I gotta
consent.
You're not
reply to that.
recognized. If you want to be recognized, you can request. You're not recognized, Ms. Steve.
I just want to say
I
that
didn't recognize you yet. Do any other
seek
members seek recognition?
Chair, I'll seek recognition.
I don't think you're quite in the order yet.
Okay.
So, who seeks recognition? Representative Schneider.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to yield my time to my colleague, Ms. Dean from Pennsylvania.
I thank you, Mr. Schneider. I seek unanimous, I have already been recognized. I enter onto the record 3 articles. Number 1 is a New Yorker documentary. The shutdown of USAID has already killed hundreds of thousands. A second article, Federation of American Scientists, investing in young children strengthens America's global choice. And a third article from UNICEF on the same topic of early childhood support. And I thank you. Gentlemen, I yield back.
Thank you. I yield back.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm happy to do that. I'll bring them up. Leadership.
Yes.
American leadership.
We will lead by ending the waste, fraud, and abuse that your party led. You're welcome. Next recognition. Were you two already recognized on this, or no? Did you speak already? If you want to make a comment, by all means, do so.
my comment just is, number 1, to Mr. Self. This is under litigation. The illegal dismantling of USAID is currently under litigation. Number 2, as Ms. Dean, Representative Dean has indicated, 95%, if you take just what you've talked about, Mr. Chairman, that's less than 5% of the USAID budget. And we can differ on policy. We can fix things that we think are incorrect. But to do away with an agency that saved millions of lives is not United States leadership. And it's not what the world and the American citizens expect of us.
I thank the ranking member for his comments. We represent the people of the United States of America. We represent their dollars. We need to be able to justify how any $1 is better off going somewhere else than staying in their pocket. So again, I would encourage, point your anger where it belongs, at the programs that were being conducted under Secretary Blinken and the State Department, which caused this reflection to end these wasteful and fraudulent USAID and State Department programs and have it rolled under the direct command and control of the Secretary of State. Might be in a different, I can't say that we'd be in a different place. I can't say that because I can't read into the non-existent hypotheticals, but the facts are the waste, fraud, and abuse that took place over the previous 4 years. And that's why we are where we are. Were you recognized already, Mr. Self, for this? Then Representative Fine is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, back when I was a businessman and I worked with people, I had a policy where if I found a mistake in a spreadsheet that I was analyzing, I stopped reviewing the spreadsheet and I sent it back to my staff to redo it from the start. Because where there was one mistake, where there was that level of carelessness to bring that mistake to me, there were probably 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 more. And so the people who made the decision to create this waste that you all want to categorize as some small percentage were so careless with the use of taxpayer dollars that it requires us to question all of the activities that you are going to. Because I reject the premise that I should say, well, the same person who thought a transgender play in Uganda was a good idea is somehow being responsible with the rest of the money. What folks should particularly understand is none of this money was actually paid for. All of it was borrowed from our children and grandchildren. So to have money that we have to pay back in the future be spent in such a callous and uncaring way that makes a laughingstock of our foreign policy, I think is a real disgrace. And what I would say to the people who are upset about this is they should be upset at the people who created the conditions that allow these agencies to be upset. Had these absolutely insane examples not been out there, it would not have undermined the confidence in the underlying agency. And so with that, I think what we've done here is a good thing. I'd yield the balance of my time to Representative Self if he'd like another bite at the apple.
Thank you. Yeah, what we're hearing here is what we have uncovered is the United States government pays for everything. I mean, just domestically. Under the SNAP program, most of it was not nutrition. We have a healthcare that exists, a healthcare system that exists on subsidies piled on tops of subsidies, and we find ourselves $38 trillion in debt. We only vote on 17% of the budget. 83% of it is on autopilot. And the director of the CBO in a recent budget committee hearing said that we are on target for $62 trillion. So what we're hearing here on the other side of the aisle is we want to continue to pay for everything. And I yield back.
Representative yields back. I believe Representative Kumlager-Dove is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was looking at the title of this bill, Global Child Thrive Act, and wondering why there's so much contention around helping children thrive. That should be the most benign thing ever that we talk about. I agree. The people of the United States do care about how their dollars are being spent. They also care about humanity within their own communities, within their country, and around the world. We're not having, I don't think the American people are interested in shelling out dollars so that our FBI director can go on a date. We should be talking about that if we want to talk about how we're using dollars. But when I think about the Global Child Thrive Act, I think about things like RUTF, right? These ready-to-use therapeutic foods that cost pennies on the dollar to make, that are actually made with American products, with our dairy, with our soybean. And for pennies on the dollar, we can feed hundreds of thousands of people around the world, children who are at risk of death from starvation. And not only does it help those children, those families, maybe that community, because if those children are not eating, then those parents have to pick between horrific options that oftentimes include death. But they are benefiting Americans because it's American farmers who are growing the products that go into the RUTFs. I'm thinking about the prenatal vitamins that we are making, that we can make, that cost pennies on the dollar, so that when we go to church and when we pray for the hungry and the sick everywhere, we also know that we can make a difference everywhere, because American products are going into a supplement that is saving a child's life. And isn't it cheaper for those pennies to go into an RUTF paste, to go into a prenatal vitamin, as opposed to dollars and hundreds of dollars that go into a bullet? So I know everyone's all like, choked up on getting all partisan, but like dial it down. Dial it down and connect back to humanity. This is about diplomacy. This is about peace. So just tap into that. And if you don't have that in your system, then rent it for a few minutes in this committee. Everyone wants to rail on these, drag shows and the condoms. Let me tell you something. I've been thinking about this for months, because I'm so sick of it. The condoms that we were giving out were going to women who are being raped by folks call terrorists. So if you're not interested in a woman being raped and giving birth to a baby terrorist who's interested in harming this country and our citizens and our allies, then hey, maybe spending a little bit of money on some plastic, on some rubber, might help save us. So just think it out. Get off the rhetoric. Think about these children. Think about the women who are being raped, who are being starved, who in another world could be related to you. Because, in the karmic universe, they are. They really are. So spend wisely, yes. Spend with humanity, yes. Spend with compassion, yes. Spend with efficiency, yes. Spend with heart, yes. And I yield back.
And I'll add, spend with the respect that every dollar comes out of the pocket of an American, and it's not charity. Who seeks recognition? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to respond to a couple of the comments. I just want to echo the sentiments of Representative Kamlager-Dove that this is the Child Thrive Act. And if we don't care about children thriving in this country and in this universe, when we are the richest country on earth, then our moral clarity and our moral compass and our moral guidepost has gone way, way astray. This should be an act that we could all represent and get support for our moral convictions of who we are and what we care about. We care about making sure that children across this globe thrive and succeed and can have a life of independence and security. In response to Representative Self's comments, I think it's a little rich that Republicans are so concerned about a deficit that they voted to add $4 trillion to this last budget cycle, solely so a few could have a tax break. That is a very inconsistent argument of the concerns that we're having when the Republicans, under Republican leadership and Republican presidents, our deficits have exploded more than under any Democrat by a mile. And this is Republicans who are adding to this deficit, adding to this budget crisis that our country and our economy finds itself in, and this is not a Democratic problem. And with that, I'd like to yield the balance of my time to Representative Schneider.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, I'm going to join with everyone saying we got to be better. The discussion oftentimes in this committee and oftentimes on the floor is not reflective of the important work before the body, and I think not a good reflection of the importance of the U.S. Congress to the country and to the world. I'll just use some colloquialisms, but as we think about what we're talking here, the idea that you fix first before throwing something away, that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, don't cut your nose to spite your face, and the last one I'll share is an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. All sayings that I suspect each of us heard growing up from our parents or grandparents, lessons on life. There are so many things that we can agree on in this committee. I know without question on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, that we agree we should be vigorously working to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. We can have a discussion about how to do that. But I also think those of us who ran for Congress to serve the people we represent at home and then chose to be on this committee, which is not a domestic policy committee, but is the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Foreign Affairs, we're here because we want to make things better at home and make things better around the world. This bill in front of us, Thrive Act, helping children, is as good of an example as that as I can think of. And we come here together on a bipartisan bill supported by members that were Democrats and Republicans. And we all should be supporting this bill. But we just can't seem to get away from out of our own way in arguing. As the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we're looking around the world and you think about this idea of ounce of prevention, pound of cure. Americans and the United States as a whole are safer when countries around the world are thriving. It's not a matter of competition, it's a matter of cooperation and U.S. global leadership that has led the world for almost 100 years. Our goal should be good governance and working to help countries around the world achieve that on behalf of their people, but also for global peace. It should be upholding the rule of law, and it should be trying to provide all people of the world the opportunity to achieve their potential and lift the human condition. Because when the human condition is better, America is better. And when the world looks for how to be, how they should behave, what they want to aspire to, they have always looked to America. And the way that this committee sometimes comports itself is not a way that we should be proud of. Let's work together, let's talk to each other, let's lower the temperature and work with respect. That way, I think we can get things done. I yield back.
Representative yields back. I appreciate whether we call it argument, debate, dialogue. I don't want you to think for me that it falls on deaf ears. To go back, we're dealing with Representative Castro's bipartisan piece. This is yours, right? It's been a while since we actually talked about it, but it's your bipartisan piece of legislation that does something that I think is, we agree on. It puts forward a special advisor to make sure that there's, among other things, not waste, fraud, abuse, to make sure that dollars get to the right place. And we're agreeing on that, right? It's something important to put in place. That's an example of doing, to use your words, of doing better. I think it's important. I think that's why you see bipartisan support for that. To your comment of, safest when we thrive. I think the world is safest when America thrives. And that's something that we have to pay the closest attention to as representatives of the United States of America. So I appreciate the comments, but we need to, again, make sure that the world is at its best because the United States of America is at its best. I think, Representative Johnson, thank you for your comments as well. You brought up taxes. Taxes are an important example of doing better. I bet there's not one person in here that really wants to say, you know what? I don't want people that work for tips to not be taxed on $25,000 of their tips. Who would come out and say, yeah, you know what? Let's go out there and people that are Uber drivers or hairdressers or bartenders or wait staff or wherever they work for tips, let's go out there and let's tax them on an additional $25,000 of their income. Or let's raise somebody's tax rate from 12 to 15%. Let's go out in there and do that. Lowering people's taxes, that's a great example of doing better, and we should all be working on that. Let's not raise people's taxes from 22 to 25% or, from 25 to 28%. Those are examples of doing better. So I don't want you to think that your comments fall on deaf ears. I listen to every single one of them. I appreciate the dialogue and debate. Does anybody else seek recognition? Seeing no one. Being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 6347 to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
I ask for a roll call vote, Chair.
Motion is agreed to. A roll call vote has been requested. Pursuant to the chair's previous announcement, this vote will be postponed. On to the next argument. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5021, the American Decade of Sports Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 5021, to require a sports diplomacy strategy to strategically leverage the major sporting events being hosted in the United States in the next decade to enhance United
Without
States.
objection. The first reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point, and I recognize myself for a statement. From the 2026 FIFA World Cup to the 2028 Summer Olympics and the 2034 Winter Games, Salt Lake City, the United States is on the heels to host mega decade of major sporting events. These events will draw massive crowds, global attention, and it really is a unique opportunity to leverage them to show the homeland of the United States of America. This bill ensures that we are prepared for the events and ready to lead with a well and thought out strategy. We're going to host the world, so let's show the world what the United States of America looks like from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Kamlager Dove, for leading this bipartisan effort alongside many members of this committee to further our standing on the global stage. And in that, is there any further discussion? Ranking Member Meeks.
Sports and athletic competitions have a unique ability to break down cultural barriers, build mutual understanding, and unite people across nationalities. Over the next decade, the United States of America will host an unprecedented series of high-profile international sporting events, including the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Los Angeles Summer Olympics. This mega decade presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the United States to strengthen its relationship with other countries by leveraging sports diplomacy as a vital foreign policy tool. Mega sporting events are among the most powerful global communication platforms in the entire world. The Olympic Games alone are watched by billions and broadcast to more than 220 countries and territories, far exceeding the reach of traditional diplomacy and offering a uniquely global stage for shaping national perceptions. By coordinating a deliberate sports diplomacy strategy, the United States can showcase American values, innovation, diversity, creativity, cities, athletes, and culture to an audience that spans nearly every corner of the world. In an era where nations increasingly compete for influence through soft power rather than military force, this global visibility is strategically essential. As the world arrives on our doorsteps throughout the next decade, sports diplomacy is not simply a cultural opportunity, it is a strategic imperative for strengthening America's soft power, renewing global partnerships, and shaping how billions of people understand the United States of America. Investing strategically in this opportunity can deliver enormous returns. And that's why I thank Representative Kamlager-Dove for authoring this very, very important bill. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking member yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Johnson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak in support of H.R. 5021, the American Decade of Sports Act. Next summer, Dallas will be in the global spotlight as a host city for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. I'm excited to see our teams win big on our home turf, and the World Cup will not only generate $1 to $2 billion in direct economic impact for Dallas, but also holds international significance as an iconic center of the global sports universe with over 5 billion viewers worldwide expected. Over the past year, I have been outspoken about making sure we have improved visa processing for athletes and visitors, enough security funding to ensure a safe experience for all, and everything from transportation needs to coordination with small business owners to show off the best that America and Dallas has to offer. This is not business as usual. There is a lot of work to do to demonstrate our nation's ability to welcome the world and to ensure that any reforms support the series of international sporting events we will host over the next decade. This bipartisan bill would upgrade sports diplomacy within the State Department so that we are better staffed and equipped to maximize the impending American sports decade. I thank Representatives Kamlager-Dove and Huizenga for their leadership on this issue and urge this committee to support this bill. And with that, I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Kamlager-Dove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Ranking Member, and congratulations to you for the birth of your grandbaby, Mr. Ranking Member. But thank you for the opportunity to mark up my American Decade of Sports Act. With the World Cup draw on Friday, I appreciate that this committee is showing bipartisan support for sports diplomacy as an essential foreign policy tool. Over the next 10 years, the U.S. will be the center of the sporting universe, hosting major international competitions like the World Cup and the Olympics. This presents an incredible window of opportunity to deliver lasting economic benefits for our communities, enhance U.S. global leadership, and establish once-in-a-generation diplomatic relationships that would not have come together without the connecting power of sports. Achieving this requires a State Department that is structured and resourced to meet the moment, and that is why my American Decade of Sports Act is designed to do. The State Department's Sports Diplomacy Division punches far above its weight and does excellent work managing day-to-day sports diplomacy programs. But it needs the strategic mandate and personnel to engage with the international sporting events being hosted in the U.S. My bill would elevate the division to its own Office of Sports Diplomacy, require the office to implement a strategy to leverage the mega-decade to enhance U.S. global leadership, and assign additional personnel focused exclusively on the international sporting events in the U.S. Sports is a powerful diplomatic tool because it allows us to transcend political boundaries and connect through our shared humanity. And that opens doors to deeper conversations and lasting relationships. In a fragmented world, it is increasingly rare to have this kind of cultural convening power. But there is a reason the Olympics is the largest peacetime gathering in the world. Everyone wants to participate in this great unifying equalizer where perseverance, teamwork, and sheer human talent are the only metrics that matter. Sports diplomacy is about tapping into this rare and powerful experience that is a potent ingredient for diplomatic success, and my bill will help us do just that. I want to thank my co-leads, Representative Huizenga, Representative McCall, and Ranking Member Meeks for their substantive, I can read, and consistent engagement on this issue. The bipartisan partnership from my Republican colleagues on sports diplomacy has truly been a bright spot of this Congress, and I am deeply grateful for their support, and I look forward to continuing to work together. I urge all of my colleagues to support this important legislation, and I yield back.
Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Huizenga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I rise in support of Ranking Member Kamlager-Dove's bill, H.R. 5021, American Decade of Sports Act, which offers a bipartisan solution to leveraging some of America's favorite pastimes as a powerful tool of diplomacy. As has been mentioned, FIFA, the upcoming Summer and Winter Olympics, the United States is set to host some of the most highly viewed, attended, and anticipated international sporting events in the next 10 years. This is a crucial moment to harness the power of sports for diplomacy, bringing together people and promoting American values and excellence around the world, all in the glow of our 250th anniversary celebration of the founding of our country. Throughout the administration, a point has been made of highlighting American excellence in sports. Thus far, President Trump has signed 5 executive orders relating to sports and attended more than 10 major sporting events, including the Ryder Cup in New York, and when my beloved Detroit Lions defeated the Washington Commanders a few weeks ago here in Washington. I took special joy in seeing a flyover by Air Force One, and more importantly, the swearing in of a number of recruits into our military. That was a special day. So we know that this is a focus that has been maybe long in coming, right? Where we have seen sports just take on a new role here in the United States. So I was proud to co-lead Ranking Member Kamala Harris's forward-thinking bill, and it ensures that the U.S. is able to carry out this revitalization of American sports. Additionally, this bill ensures that the State Department is readily equipped to implement this newfound focus through strategic planning, engagement, and staffing, all of which is critically important to the execution of these events. This bill is a bipartisan solution designed to bring cultures and communities together, create economic opportunities in sporting event host communities, and puts one more tool in the State Department's diplomatic arsenal. And regardless of whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer, the mega decade of sports opens doors for communities across the United States, creating new opportunities to engage the next generation of fans, and enhances local tourism and fosters small business growth. The American Decade of Sports Act accomplishes these goals and is a must-pass for these future events hosted in the United States. And I do support this measure, but I will be offering a technical amendment to include the 2029 and 2033 Ryder Cups in the bill's definition section. I actually witnessed firsthand when I was in the Michigan State Legislature. I was the chairman of the Commerce Committee when Oakland Hills Country Club hosted the Ryder Cup in Michigan in 2004. And the economic impact at the state was significant, so significant that we were literally passing legislation to accommodate growth and people coming in, and it was quite an economic boon. So as many of you know, the Ryder Cup dates back to 1927 and has become one of the world's greatest sporting events between the United States and Europe, this last Ryder Cup notwithstanding. It captivates millions of viewers worldwide, in addition to the tens of thousands who travel to the United States to attend the tournament. I personally am an enthusiastic, if not bad, golfer. But I have seen the economic impact that it has. And additionally, the tournament routinely generates hundreds of millions of dollars for the host state and the local economy. The 2029 and 2033 Ryder Cups will be hosted in Minnesota and in California, respectively, and I believe are logical additions to the mega-decade sports diplomacy strategy that is being implemented here. So I deeply appreciate my friend's bipartisan work on the bill, including during the state authorization markup, and I urge my colleagues to support the bill with the adoption of my amendment. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. You're going to get your opportunity for that amendment in one moment. Is there any further discussion? Well, Representative Kane.
I am pleased to be a co-sponsor of the American Decade of Sports Act, led by Representatives Kamala Harris and Huizenga. America has an exciting opportunity to host important world games like the Olympics and the World Cup, as well, and the Ryder Cup, over the course of the next decade. My home state of New Jersey is proud to host 8 matches of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It's imperative that America stand ready to welcome the many visitors these sporting events will bring. This bipartisan legislation takes an important step to ensure that the State Department implements a strategic approach to leverage sports diplomacy in the United States. Throughout this legislation, we can ensure that America is prepared to capitalize on this unique opportunity. I thank my colleagues for their partnership, and I urge the committee to support this important legislation. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? There being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Representative Huizenga.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk shall distribute the amendment. Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment number 70 to H.R. 5021, offered by Mr. Huizenga of Michigan.
Without objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and Representative Huizenga is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make this short, and I know we've had discussions with the sponsor about this as well. But my amendment's very, very simple. On page 7, line 19, we insert, quote, the 2029 and 2033 Ryder Cups, close quote, after Summer Olympics and Paralympics. So it's as simple as that. I believe it just gives some more additional flexibility to State Department and meets the goals and objectives of this wider bill. So I would appreciate support from my colleagues and on my amendment and on the passage of this bill. With that, I yield back.
Representative yields back. I support this amendment. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
The Ryder Cup, little ball, stay still, hard to hit. Some can hit it long, but they can't hit it straight. Some can hit it straight, but they can't hit it long. And some just sit on the sidelines and watch that ball just move. Of course I support this amendment, and it should be included.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Some of us can neither hit it long or straight. I would just add that little caveat to your descriptor of what's going on, but I appreciate your support.
Is golf your sport?
Not now, it used to be. Bad back now. Can't hit it straight or long.
Very good. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. Being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment offered by Representative Huizenga. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments? There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 5021 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. A roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. Thank you. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 4413, the End Cyprus Embargo Act. This bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 4413, to provide for non-applicability of a policy of denial for exports, re-exports, or transfers of defense articles and defense services destined for or originating in the Republic of Cyprus.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. I recognize myself for a brief statement. The arms embargo on Cyprus was placed decades ago at a different time for the world and at a different time for Cyprus. History has since moved forward, and this bill ensures our policies match the current reality. In 2020, President Trump signed legislation into law that would allow the president to waive the arms embargo on Cyprus for 1 year at a time. Since that legislation was signed, that waiver has been issued every year, including by President Trump just over 2 months ago. However, the 1-year waiver does not allow Cyprus to participate in long-term foreign military sales. This bill would extend the 1-year arms embargo waiver available to the president to a 5-year term. It does not require the president to issue the waiver or sell any weapons to Cyprus, but ensures he has maximum flexibility to conduct foreign policy as he chooses. Providing Cyprus with additional defensive weapons would further bring Cyprus away from Russia's orbit and benefit U.S. industry by unlocking the potential of multi-year procurement contracts. Cyprus has progressed in anti-money laundering reforms as well as in distancing itself from Russia, and this bill rewards that progress while maintaining conditionality to ensure Cyprus continues down the path of becoming a more reliable U.S. partner and ally. Simply put, this arms embargo reform to sell Cyprus more weapons is America first, a new market that wants to leave our adversaries behind and improve interoperability with us is good for business and good for the United States, good for our industries. Giving the Trump administration the option to deepen our cooperation with a country that has demonstrated considerable efforts to get closer to the United States is a necessary fix to a Cold War-era policy relic. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Pappas, for introducing this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Is there any further discussion on the legislation? Ranking Member Meeks.
The friendship between the American people and the people of Cyprus is deep and enduring. And the government of the Republic of Cyprus is a critical U.S. partner for maintaining peace, security, and stability in the Mediterranean. I've long advocated for deepening our strategic relationship with Cyprus, and I've been pleased to see successful administrations take that goal very seriously. Unfortunately, the security relationship between Cyprus and the United States is constrained by an arms embargo that was originally intended to promote diplomatic engagement to address Turkey's invasion and occupation of sovereign Cypriot territory. It is clear, however, that the Turkish government has no interest in following decades of consistent U.S. policy and UN resolutions to ensure a diplomatic resolution on the foundation of the Bizonio Bicommunal Federation of Cyprus. Turkish President Erdogan continues to take aggressive actions against Greece, a NATO ally, and Cyprus, a key U.S. strategic partner in the Eastern Mediterranean, along with other destabilizing actions across the Middle East and North Africa. The United States should not constrain its deepening relationship with Cyprus any longer on the dwindling hope that Erdogan's behavior will change. So I'm glad that Congress has, in recent years, taken steps to walk back the arms embargo on Cyprus to strengthen our relationship. We've given the executive branch the ability to waive the embargo for one-year periods, was a welcome step. It is long past time to extend that runway. So I hope to see us take the issue even further in the future and move forward toward removing the arms embargo altogether. So I want to thank Representatives Pappas, Titus, Barukas, and Keene, and other members who have worked hard to make sure we keep moving the ball forward. And I strongly support this measure and yield back the balance of my time.
Any other members seek recognition? Representative Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to speak in support of the End the Cyprus Embargo Act, of which I am a co-sponsor. In recent years, American Cypriot partnerships have grown stronger. Whether defense partnerships, scientific research, collaboration, or support for Ukrainian refugees, the Republic of Cyprus has become an important partner of the United States and our allies abroad. The Eastern Mediterranean is crucial to America's national security and economic future. It is critical that the United States maintains a robust partnership with its ally, Cyprus, by extending the waiver renewal period for the arms embargo from 1 to 5 years. This legislation would make an important step in fostering America's continued alliance with Cyprus. I support this effort in the State Department reauthorization, and I am encouraged to see the committee consider this legislation in today's markup. I support this bill, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Representative yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Representative Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a proud Greek-American legislator and a vice co-chair of the Congressional Hellenic Caucus, I'm very much in support of this bill and was proud to co-lead it with my colleague, Congressman Chris Pappas, in the Cyprus Embargo Act. As was mentioned, the United States lifted its arms embargo on Cyprus in 2019 through the Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act. This lifting, however, remains subject to annual renewed waivers. While the end of the embargo technically enables Cyprus to procure U.S.-made defense systems, the requirement for annual reauthorization creates unnecessary and counterproductive hurdles. Extending the waiver period from 1 year to 5 years, as this bill does, is really essential to enabling Cyprus to effectively plan, contract, and acquire U.S. equipment. Defense procurement cycles typically take a minimum of 3 years, and companies are often hesitant to enter into agreements when their ability to export depends on short-term, annually renewed waivers. Cyprus has consistently met and in many cases exceeded the conditions set forth by the 2019 East Med Act. It's halted all port calls by Russian naval vessels, hosted more than 50 U.S. Navy ships during that same period, and has worked closely with the United States to combat illicit finance and money laundering, as reflected in the 2024 joint statement following the U.S.-Cyprus First Strategic Dialogue. Cyprus's posture directly aligns with broader U.S. regional goals, especially as the Eastern Mediterranean grows in geopolitical importance as a corridor between Europe, the Middle East, and other major maritime routes. Although Cyprus has never faced difficulty in renewing its waiver, the very existence of it, combined with its short duration, restricts precisely the strategic cooperation that it was intended to support. In its current form, the annual waiver undermines a reliable U.S. partner's ability to purchase U.S.-made systems, which in turn hinders the growing number of joint military exercises between our two countries. Cyprus's limited access to U.S. equipment also creates interoperability challenges that impede combined training and operational readiness. Strengthening the defense relationship with Cyprus enhances regional stability and supports U.S. efforts to maintain a NATO-aligned, Western-oriented security environment. This issue has been bipartisan, bicameral, has support across the aisles, across the Capitol complex. The very committee that we sit on right here has already approved the relevant language as part of the State Department authorization package that we passed a few months ago, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee had passed a similar measure on October 22nd. The United States should enable a dependable partner in the Eastern Mediterranean to fully access our defense market, and should not allow a mere technicality to limit our deepening bilateral relationships and strategic partnership. Overall, it's a win-win. So I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was mentioning earlier, it's important for us to work together, and I'm pleased to thank my colleagues, bipartisan colleagues, Representative Pappas, Bilrakis, Titus, Malliotakis, Keene, Pallone, Fitzpatrick, Norcross, Menendez, and Sherman for leading on this bill, a very important piece of legislation. Cyprus sits at the intersection of Europe, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Middle East, regions that make up the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridors, also known as IMEC. This is where our security interests converge. For decades, the United States maintained an arms embargo that no longer reflects reality. Cyprus has met the conditions Congress outlined in the Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act, and this bill updates our policy to match those facts. It shifts the waiver from 1 year to 5 years while preserving strict requirements on human rights compliance, anti-money laundering reforms, and the continued denial of port access to Russian military vessels. That is the right balance. Cyprus should not be forced to depend on adversarial states for defense material. Strengthening the U.S.-Cyprus relationship enhances NATO's southeastern flank, supports ongoing UN-facilitated efforts towards resolving the island's division, and advances the trilateral cooperation Congress has repeatedly endorsed. It's also worth noting that this is a case where Congress is correcting an erratic executive branch. Over the past year, the Trump administration has lurched between disengagement and ad hoc pressure campaigns that confuse our allies and embolden our adversaries. In the Eastern Mediterranean, an area where Russian influence, Iranian proxies, and regional instability intersect, the United States cannot afford policy drift or improvisation. By codifying a predictable, conditions-based framework, this bill reinforces the rule of law, approach that partners expect from us and that our strategic posture requires. I am proud to strongly support the bill, and I urge my others to join me. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? There being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 4413 to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no.
No.
Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to.
Ask for a roll call vote.
A roll call vote has been requested. Pursuant to the chair's previous announcement, this vote will be postponed. Without objection, oh, never mind. I don't need that one. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 6230, the Tehran Incitement to Violence Act. The bill was circulated in advance. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 6230, to designate certain individuals as specially designated global terrorists.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. I will recognize myself for a couple minutes on the bill. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Self, for leading this bill, which serves as a timely reminder of the ongoing threat the Iranian regime poses to U.S. national security. It's not just responsible for sponsoring dangerous terrorist proxies that target U.S. forces in the Middle East, making it the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, but its threats extend far beyond that. This is a regime that the Department of Justice has repeatedly found responsible for brazenly targeting U.S. citizens on American soil. According to the intelligence community, attempts to assassinate numerous U.S. officials for their role in the strike of the IRGC commander, General Qasem Soleimani, in 2020 have been prevalent. This includes our own president, Donald J. Trump. The Iranian regime's goal is to sow discord in the United States, not just by targeting U.S. politicians, but also launching cyber attacks and influence operations that disrupt hospitals and threaten to undermine the U.S. electoral process. This bill would require a determination of whether sanctions should be levied against the key Iranian officials who promote violence, including threats against our leaders. This is a regime that thrives on instability and violence, promoting vile extremism at every single turn, by any means necessary, any way that they can figure out to do it, and they must be held accountable. I would urge all of my colleagues to support this piece of legislation, and again, I thank my colleague for its introduction. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you. I support this bill. I have some more comments, but, at its core, this bill seeks to apply Standard International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, property blocking sanctions against a set of Iranian religious and government figures, as well as the institutions they represent, who have publicly threatened the life of the United States president and allied leaders. These threats are unacceptable. They're dangerous and reflect the Iranian regime's long pattern of hostility toward the United States. The bill also includes reasonable waiver authorities that allow the executive branch to scale these sanctions up or down, preserving diplomatic leverage. And to me, that is very important, and I commend Mr. Self for including it. But I also, want to be real, because the bill actually will have no or have very little practical impact on the individuals and entities it targets. You know, the American people have to understand that. Many of them, and in some cases their entire networks, are already subject to U.S. sanctions under existing authorities. Additional listings may feel satisfying, but they do not on their own make meaningful change in Iran's calculus or behavior. And so this brings me to what I believe is the deeper issue, that this committee should be conducting serious oversight of U.S.-Iran policy. We should be holding hearings, multiple hearings in fact, to understand the impact of the sanctions already in place, how they interact with each other, and how they fit into any coherent long-term strategy toward Iran. Sanctions by themselves, sanctions alone, no matter how often we repurpose them, are not a strategy, and they are certainly not a means to an end. What I believe we need from the Trump administration is a clear articulation of what its Iran strategy actually is and what it aims to achieve. Congress should be hearing directly from the Secretary of State on how he plans to keep the Iranian regime in check at a moment of extreme volatility in the region. We need to understand what steps are being taken to ensure that Iran's massive stockpile of highly enriched uranium remains secure, and that the nuclear program does not advance from its current post-12-day war state. And we need, urgently, a plan for how the administration intends to work with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA. You see, the IAEA has been barred from meaningful access for far too long. And if we care about preventing a nuclear crisis, and I know every member of Congress, everyone on this dais does, then restoring transparency, monitoring, and verification inside of Iran is absolutely essential. And while I do not oppose the underlying intent of this bill, and I understand it, I just can't pretend that it will fundamentally alter Iran's trajectory. What will make a difference is serious, sustained oversight, credible diplomacy, allied coordination, and a whole of government strategy that goes beyond simply adding one more sanctions designation to a list. So I hope that this committee refocuses our efforts where they will do the most good, on ensuring that the United States policy toward Iran is strategic, coherent, and capable of meeting the threat before us. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking member yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak in support of my bill, the Tehran Incitement to Violence Act, H.R. 6230. This bill sanctions Iranian clerics, organizations, and state-linked entities for issuing and amplifying fatwas that explicitly call for the deaths of U.S. President Donald J. Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and other political leaders. Such sanctions include imposing asset freezes and total immigration bans to deter such deadly incitement. The fatwas in question charge President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu with mahareba, waging war against God, an offense under Iran's Islamic Penal Code that carries the death penalty, and in the explicit words of Quran 5:33, can be carried out by execution, crucifixion, or cross amputation of hands or feet. This is not mere rhetoric. History shows these religious decrees become permanent bounties on human life, as we saw when Salman Rushdie was nearly murdered in 2022 in direct response to a 1989 Iranian fatwa, 30 years later. These threats are rooted in Sharia, a legal, political, and cultural system that is fundamentally incompatible to the United States Constitution and Western civilization. Our Constitution begins with "we the people" and declare the rights come from our Creator and are extended equally to all men. Sharia states Allah has said. Followers of Sharia believe Muhammad received a divine legal code that stands supreme over all man-made laws. Sharia is not just a private faith. It is a total system of governance that endorses practices America has long rejected. Slavery has never been abolished in Islamic doctrine. Women's testimony is worth half a man's. Apostates are to be killed, and non-Muslims are treated as second-class citizens. These are not fringe interpretations. They are mainstream rulings followed by the very clerics this bill would target. When Iranian regime leaders issue Mahreba fatwas against an American president, it's not just rhetoric. They are applying a Sharia verdict that declares his blood can lawfully be spilt. That is a direct threat to President Trump and on the constitutional order every one of us swore to defend. Passing this bill sends an unmistakable message that the United States will never accept Sharia supremacy, whether it is preached from Tehran or practiced anywhere on American soil. This builds common sense. When we have foreigners from a hostage nation calling for the assassination of an American president and our allies, we have a duty to act. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Representative Self for bringing this bill forward and for you hearing it today. Look, the rise of mainstream Islam around the world is one of the greatest existential threats to the world. We talked about it earlier today in my bill about anti-Semitism in Europe, and we can see it in this overt, threatening action towards the United States, our people, and its interests around the world. So calling Sharia for the danger that it is and taking acts to deal with it is something that we need to be doing every day, and I thank Representative Self for taking it so seriously, and I'm proud to support the bill. I yield back.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the committee will move for consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment?
I have an amendment to A&S. I don't know. He needs to lay it out.
One moment.
I have an A&S at the desk.
The clerk shall distribute the self-amendment in the nature of a substitute, number 110.
The amendment has been distributed by electronic device.
Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6230, offered by Mr. Self of Texas.
Without objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Does the gentleman wish to be recognized? Representative Self, do you wish to be recognized?
Mr. Chairman, I just urge support to this amendment, to this A&S to the bill, original bill. Thank you.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? There we go. There being no further discussion, do any members wish to offer an amendment to the self-amendment in the nature of a substitute?
I have an amendment, Castro Amendment number 81, sure.
Representative Castro. Clerk shall distribute the amendment. Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6230, offered by Mr. Castro of Texas.
Without objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Representative is recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that threats by foreign officials against the President of the United States are unacceptable and that we should respond. I hope that this amendment will be helpful in changing just one line and make this bill and the language to it more appropriate, more functional, and also prevent it from becoming an anachronism. My language, instead of specifically naming Donald Trump, who is the president right now, or Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel right now, my amendment would instead refer to the office of the president and other leaders. So specifically, the language would say, the President of the United States and other United States officials and the leaders of countries with mutual defense treaties with the United States and countries that are major non-NATO allies of the United States pursuant to Section 517 of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. And, so I believe that's because this issue goes beyond one president, and I believe the legislation should reflect that. Under this bill, the president would need to make sanctions determinations on the listed individuals and entities for 6 years. So in other words, President Trump is president right now, but in a few years you'll have a different president. Same thing with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He may be prime minister for 6 months or 2 more years or 5 more years. We just don't know. But there's a real chance that the bill, the way that it's written, will become an anachronism. And so if the bill was enacted today, it would extend to 2031 with a new president of the United States and potentially a new Israeli prime minister. We also know that Iranian leaders have threatened more than just President Trump or Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I believe the legislation should reflect that as well. We also know that Iranian officials have threatened other U.S. officials, including, for example, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and former State Department official Brian Hook. My amendment will ensure that the bill covers those incidents as well. This amendment would ensure that future leaders of the United States and U.S. allies are covered for the period the bill covers. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, which would protect whomever the next president happens to be. With that, I yield back.
Representative yields back. I recognize myself for a moment. I oppose this amendment. The intent of this bill is to be specific and tailored to hold the regime accountable for very specific and real threats against our current U.S. president. And therefore, I do oppose this amendment. I thank you for offering it. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
I strongly support this amendment. I think that what the gentleman has presented is, when we think about Iran and Iran's relationship to the United States currently, they're a threat to any number of individuals. Clearly, President Trump and as indicated, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, but there's other threats that Iran poses also. And I think that it should be a continuation so that everybody is covered. That's why in my statement earlier, I talked about how we need to make sure that we had some in-depth hearings on U.S. policy with regard to Iran. And I think that that is irrespective of who the current president is, or who the past president is, or who the future president may be. This is something that we should take seriously and not make just about one individual. And I think that the gentleman's amendment says it is the office of the presidency. I mean, that's what is about. That's what this is about. And what we, as a country, is about institutions. He also talked about threats to secretaries of states and other individuals in the United States. Everyone's life is important, and Iran should not be able to get away with just threats to a individual or individuals. It should be all of us who may be in this capacity. It could be a member of Congress. It could be any of us doing on this committee. I mean, they're listening right now. It could be to me. It could be to the chairman. So I think, and I strongly support the gentleman's amendment, because I think it makes sense, and it also sends a message, I think, to Iran: do not mess with any of the officials or threaten officials of the United States of America, because that should be the one thing that brings us all together, irrespective of whoever is the current member of Congress, or the current Secretary of State, or the current Prime Minister, or the current President of the United States. It should carry out throughout. With that, I yield back, and I strongly support this.
Ranking Member yields back. And just to let you know, I am committed to working with both of you on expanding the scope of who we need to look at for protection, undoubtedly, but I still oppose the amendment. Representative Self is recognized.
Yeah, we need to look at Iran as a whole, but we're addressing individual fatwas here. We're not addressing some hypotheticals here. We are addressing 5 imams from Iran that have issued fatwas under Mahareba against individuals. That's what this bill does. It focuses on 5 individual imams who have issued fatwas against, including a named president of the United States. I oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? Mr. Self, would you like to yield a moment to Representative Castro? He's asking.
Absolutely. I yield to the gentleman.
Fellow Texan, all right. Yeah, no, in my amendment, I'm not changing the Iranian individuals that you're naming at all. But, you know, if, let's just say theoretically, even though we're on different sides of this, let's say J.D. Vance is president in a few years, and these guys say something about him, because you specifically named Donald Trump and not J.D. Vance, this bill doesn't apply. And so I'm saying, you know, we ought to say it's the office and the office of others, other State Department officials or other foreign leaders or whatever it may be. I think another challenge, Keith, is in your bill, it says other political leaders, but you got to define that somewhere, right? Or you got to say that the secretary is going to define it. And in the language, it doesn't say that. So I'm not messing with those, who you're naming, the specific people. I'm just trying to make the bill like functionally effective, and also I don't want it to become ineffective and an anachronism in a few years. That's all. I yield back.
To follow the logic, though, from across the aisle, if we need to continually examine our Iranian policies, that's exactly when we ought to do it. If a president of some other name is in office, let's do it again if they issue a fatwa against that president. Because to follow y'all's logic, this Iran will be an ongoing issue. So let's do it again if they do it again. Let's continue to keep up the pressure.
Well, sure, but then don't name it like for 6 years, right? Then don't create a 6-year period. I mean, just say that when Donald Trump is no longer in office or when Netanyahu is no longer in office.
Well,
right?
This Congress can't commit future Congresses, so they can change it or they can do it again. So following the Democrat logic here, let's set this standard in place, and then if we need to do it again, Iran raises their head again, do it again, and I yield back.
Okay.
Any other members seek recognition? Representative Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just proffer for both my colleagues. You probably can do both, right? If you want, you can leave President Trump's name in there, and you can leave Prime Minister Netanyahu's name in there, and then also add the language of the gentleman from Texas, which would incorporate future presidents and other leaders from around the country. So I actually think you could accomplish both. It doesn't have to be an and/or. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
And I would accept that we can work toward that end, Mr. Chairman.
I'll look forward to you all getting together for dinner. Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. Being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment offered by Representative Castro. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The motion is not agreed to. The amendment is not agreed to. Roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. Are there any further amendments? Further proceedings on this bill are postponed. Thank you. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 4397, the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act of 2025. The bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 4397, to require the President to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization, to direct the Secretary of State to submit a report to Congress regarding such designation and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. I will recognize myself for an opening statement. I want to thank my colleague and fellow Florida representative, Representative Mauro Diaz-Balart, for leading this important and timely bill to sanction the Muslim Brotherhood and restrict its ability to operate within the United States of America. For years, our partners across the Middle East have been warning of the threat of this organization and what it poses. Initially established in Egypt in the late 1920s, it's grown into a transnational organization with chapters around the world. This is more than just a political organization. It promotes extreme and destabilizing views which continue to inspire acts of terrorism across the globe, including most notably Hamas and its horrific October 7, 2023 attack on Israel, in which 1,200 civilians were killed, over 1,200. And as the Trump administration noted in its recent executive order, these links were further underscored after October 7, 2023, when the Lebanese chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood worked hand in glove with Hamas, Hezbollah, and other Palestinian terrorists to launch direct attacks against Israel, furthering its October 7 aim. More recently, a Muslim Brotherhood affiliate in Jordan was implicated in a plot to destabilize this critical regional security partner. The plot, according to Jordanian government officials, similarly involved members of the Muslim Brotherhood's Lebanon chapter who were reportedly manufacturing weapons and training militants to target sites in Jordan, which, if successful, would have been a substantial blow to the Jordanian people and a major counterterrorist risk. For too long, the threat the Muslim Brotherhood poses to U.S. national security has been downplayed here in the United States, and it's well past time for course correction. I urge my colleagues to robustly support this bill and finally put in place much-needed measures to address this very real and increasingly prevalent threat. That being said, are there any other members that seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I have to oppose Representative Diaz-Balad's bill that directs the president to designate the Muslim Brotherhood and anyone the president deems an affiliate as a foreign terrorist organization, and specifically designated global terrorists, imposing sweeping visas and asset bans on a vast and ill-defined set of groups and individuals. You know, as my colleagues know, I don't believe that this is a new effort, but more of a politicized one that is wrapped in a kind of terrorism rhetoric. You know, one of the fundamental problems is that this legislation attempts to apply a tool designed for discrete terrorist organizations or terrorist groups to something that is not a single organization at all, but a diffuse ideology. Around the world, groups associated with the Muslim Brotherhood operate independently, spanning political partners, religious parties, I should say, religious organizations, charities, and yes, in some cases, paramilitary actors. They are not a coordinated global network. So to be clear, some offshoots do meet the criteria for terrorist designation. Some of the offshoots do meet the criteria. But we already have the tools to designate them. Hamas is one of those groups. It is already a designated foreign terrorist organization and rightly subject to numerous sanctions and measures, both executive and legislative. So instead of solving a problem, this bill creates several new ones. Internationally, it would complicate the U.S. engagement with political leaders and parties who have historic and nonviolent ties to the Brotherhood-affiliated movements, like in Morocco. It would alienate important regional partners in the Middle East, such as Qatar and Turkey. And I am also deeply concerned about the implications that this bill would have domestically. Section 2 has sweeping visa prohibitions, which amounts to me to be a backdoor Muslim ban. It could subject millions of people, including many Americans, many Muslims who live in my district, for example, to arbitrary and subjective determinations based on vague, indirect, or tangential affiliations. The language is so imprecise, this bill invites discriminatory and political targeting under the pretext of national security. You know, the Trump administration could use this bill to justify investigations, asset seizures, and even prosecutions aimed at Muslim Americans an Arab and Muslim civil rights organization chilling free speech and undermining constitutional rights. Moreover, this bill hands sweeping authority to the president, who just yesterday called one of our Muslim American colleagues garbage. This administration has shown a clear pattern of racist, discriminatory, and unconstitutional conduct. And if this bill were to become law, that abuse of power will only get worse. This bill also requires that any FTO or SDGT designations must remain for 4 years, a completely arbitrary time frame that provides no room for meaningful review. And that is why leading civil liberties and Muslim American organizations, including the American Civil Liberties Union, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, the Constitution Project, and the Southern Poverty Law Center have raised serious concerns. So let me be clear. We must use all the tools at our disposal to protect Americans from terrorism. And I have consistently supported designations and sanctions based on violent actions, not mere ideology or politics, and will do so again today, including for Rep. ICE's bill related to the Houthis and their continued acts of terror. And as a New Yorker, and visited Ground Zero, I was there in New York and will never forget it after 9/11, I know there is no more sacred duty than keeping Americans safe. But I believe that this bill is the wrong approach and could be a dangerous one. And so therefore, I must be opposed to this measure. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking member yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak in support of H.R. 4397, the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act of 2025, led by Representatives Mario Diaz-Balart and Jared Moskowitz. This bill would designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization and establish a process for designating its members, branches, and affiliates as terrorists. The bill amends the Anti-Terrorism Act and treats the Muslim Brotherhood in the same manner that the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, was treated during the height of its terrorist activities. It would prohibit Americans from transacting with the Brotherhood and prevent its members from entering the United States. This legislation would codify key elements of President Trump's recent executive order and provide a permanent statutory framework to address the ongoing threat posed by the Muslim Brotherhood and its violent offshoots. Despite its efforts to present itself as a mainstream political or social movement, the Muslim Brotherhood and its affiliates are rooted in an extremist ideology with a long history of supporting terrorism. Founded in 1928 by Hassan el-Banna in Egypt, the Brotherhood's stated goal from the beginning was to establish a global caliphate based on Islamic supremacy, to restructure societies and governments according to its interpretation of Sharia and to advance a radical agenda. When I was stationed in Egypt under Mubarak, Mubarak was still there, he had Egyptian armed forces kick down doors and simply shoot who was in the room, Muslim Brotherhood. While the Brotherhood often maintains plausible deniability, many of its branches and affiliates provide the ideological justification, financial support, and recruitment pipelines for jihadist violence. The Brotherhood has directly inspired or supported terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Al-Qaeda. Its influence extends across the Middle East, Europe, and into the United States. The violence and instability it has fueled has already led Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE, and Egypt to ban the organization outright. This bill would bring U.S. policy into alignment with our key regional partners. More importantly, the Muslim Brotherhood provides material support to U.S.-designated terrorist organizations. That fact is not speculation. It is documented in the Brotherhood's own internal strategy papers, including the 1991 explanatory memorandum on the general strategic goal for the group in North America, a document that was seized by the FBI in 2004 and admitted as evidence in the Holy Land Foundation terrorism financing trial. That document, written by a senior Muslim Brotherhood leader in the United States, explicitly describes the Brotherhood's work here as a kind of, and I quote, kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house so that Islam is made victorious over all other religions and civilizations. It lists dozens of Brotherhood front organizations operating in the United States and outlines a long-term plan to infiltrate and undermine American institutions through a, quote, civilization jihadist process. That's the Muslim Brotherhood's own description of its mission on American soil, in its own words, recovered by our law enforcement. The threat that this violent Sharia extremist group opposes to America is clear. The evidence is overwhelming, and the time to act is now. Designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization is long overdue, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 4397, and I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ecosystem commonly described as the Muslim Brotherhood draws its strength from institutional failure. Whenever and wherever governance collapses, movements across this ideological landscape, some political, some social service-oriented, and some violent, step into the void. Hamas presents the most lethal manifestation of that reality. A brotherhood branch whose ideological lineage fused with militancy, culminating in the barbaric attacks of October 7th and the ongoing threat to Israel and regional stability. That pattern demands Congress take the threat seriously and confront the networks that enable violent extremism. The text before us situates its authorities in established intelligence findings, incorporates the clear record on Hamas, and directs annual reporting that forces the executive to document which entities threaten U.S. interest and why. Those mechanisms matter. They create visibility into chapters that provide financial, logistical, and political support to violence, and they keep Congress in the loop through mandatory designation reviews and visa ineligibility determinations tied to hostage taking. This approach reflects a tightening of the scope compared with earlier drafts and anchors the bill in conduct that meets our statutory thresholds. The larger context for this vote is the state of the executive branch. Over the past year, the Trump administration has dismantled or undermined the very institutions that buttress our counterterrorism work, freezing foreign assistance, hollowing out USAID, pressuring independent agencies, and treating civil service expertise as expendable. These actions damage the capabilities and capacity needed to distinguish between violent extremism and political activity, and they show an alarming disregard for the institutional restraint these authorities require. Congress must respond by sharpening oversight and by writing statutes that limit discretion and expand transparency rather than simply offering blank checks. This bill is not perfect. I support the bill because it has guardrails. The responsibility it creates for the executive are coupled with recurring congressional review, clear statutory definitions, and reporting standards that prevent sweeping, undifferentiated application of terrorism authorities to political actors or civil society groups operating lawfully within partner states. The bill's architecture reflects an understanding that weakening institutions is what empowers extremist movements, while strengthening evidence-driven governance is what constrains them. Moving this legislation affirms that principle and ensures Congress, not an inconsistent executive or one with personal conflicts, remains the arbiter of how terrorism designations are used in America's name. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm grateful to Representatives Diaz-Balart and Representative Moskowitz for bringing this great bill forward. You know, the fact of the matter is we're not reinventing the wheel today. 11 countries around the world, 11, have already designated the Muslim Brotherhood to be a terrorist organization. And it would be surprising, perhaps to some, to know that many of the countries that have done it are Muslim-led countries. Representative talked about Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Jordan, but they're not the only ones. Bahrain has as well. Even in Europe, they've begun to ban the Muslim Brotherhood. Austria has banned the Muslim Brotherhood. But why should we care? How does it matter here in the United States? Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is the umbrella organization that is driving mainstream Muslim terrorism throughout the United States. In fact, they've been linked to 29 organizations operating here in the United States. The North American Islamic Trust is an affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood. It holds the deed to 80% of the 3,500 mosques in the United States. The Muslim Student Association, the architect of many of the terrorist attacks that happen on American campuses, the so-called encampments where Jewish students were targeted, were organized by affiliates of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Council on American Islamic Relations, an organization that does irreparable damage to the cause of civil rights because it masquerades as a civil rights organization while advocating for Muslim terror, is an affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood. As these issues get greater and greater and greater in the United States, as we see cities like Dearborn tell Christians they are no longer welcome here, as we see churches in Texas told that they have to accept graffiti on the sides of their institution as a practicing of faith by a Muslim Brotherhood organization, it is more important that we stand up now, more important than it ever has been, for us to stand up and say, we're going to follow the lead of 11 other countries. And not in the last year, some of them have done it for many, many years, and saying we are not interested in having this in the United States. It is a terrorist movement, it is a terrorist organization, and it puts the lives of Americans at risk. So I'm proud to co-sponsor this bill, and I am very, very optimistic and hopeful that it will receive passage this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none.
No.
Oh, Mr. Moskowitz, are you raising your hand over there?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Got to raise it higher. Oh, Mr. Moskowitz,
there we
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry you didn't see it earlier. I'll just add just a couple of quick points. And that really is, look, I'm not saying the bill is perfect, but I do reject the premise that this will lead to a backdoor Muslim ban. I don't support a Muslim ban in this country. I didn't support it in the first Trump administration. But I do think it is extremely telling that Saudi Arabia, Jordan, UAE, and Egypt designated this group a terrorist organization and banned them from their countries. Our allies in the region, who know this group the best, ban them in their own countries. But for some reason, we can't get it done. We've been trying to do this for like a decade. And that, to me, is the most telling piece. And so I want to separate this group from American Muslims. We should not conflate them. This is a group that supports terrorism. That's not what the majority of the Muslim population in America wants. But I really think that we should look to our allies in the region. They have almost unanimously banned this group from their countries. And in my conversations with ambassadors from our allies from this region, they're surprised we've not been able to get it done, quite frankly. And so that's why I brought the bill forward with my colleague, Mario Diaz-Balart, who's been bringing this bill forward for a couple of years, and that's why I do support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative yields back. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the committee will move to consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? Representative Self.
Mr. Chairman, I have an ANS at the desk that actually addresses many of Mr. Schneider's comments.
Clerk shall distribute the self-amendment in the nature of a substitute.
The amendment has been distributed by electronic device.
Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4397, offered by Mr. Self of Texas. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act of 2025. Section 2, prohibitions on Muslim Brotherhood operations in the United States. Findings, determinations. Section 1002 of the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1987
Without
is
objection,
amended.
further reading is dispensed with. Representative Self, you are recognized.
This, as I say, addresses many of the comments by Mr. Schneider, and I recommend my colleagues support it. I yield.
Representative yields. Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. There being no further discussion, do any other members wish to offer an amendment to the self-amendment in the nature of a substitute? There being no further amendments, the question now occurs on the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Self. I represent a yes vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. There being no further amendments, I move that the committee report H.R. 4397 as amended to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 6338, the Stop Illegal Fishing Act. The bill was circulated in advance, and the clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 6338, to require the imposition of sanctions with respect to foreign persons and foreign vessels that engage in illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is considered read and open to amendment, and I recognize myself for a couple of minutes. Illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, that's the more innocuous term for what this is. It's a serious threat to coastal nations worldwide. What it really is, it's harassment. It is mostly a middle finger from the Chinese Communist Party to neighboring and coastal countries. The Chinese Communist Party oversees the largest illegal fishing fleet. They deplete fish stocks, they violate maritime laws, they harm local economies across the globe. And when these vessels operate unchallenged in contested waters or other nations' exclusive economic zones, they do serious, serious damage to their economies. This is especially true in the South China Sea, where Chinese Communist Party-linked fishing vessels often operate alongside their own maritime militia to assert their control over waters that are not theirs. Beijing will not hold these vessels or these individuals accountable. In fact, they support them as much as they support the entities within the CCP that work specifically to steal U.S. intellectual property or intellectual property from other places. It is just as much a whole-of-government effort. This bill gives the president the authority to sanction foreign persons and vessels engaged in illegal fishing. It requires annual reporting on sanctions, establishes a sanctions program, and empowers the State Department and Homeland Security to deny entry, revoke visas, and prevent U.S. entry for those involved. I thank Congresswoman Kim for her leadership on this bipartisan bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Do any other members seek recognition? Ranking Member Meeks.
The tragedy of the commons is the notion that individuals can all benefit from a shared resource. And every individual has an incentive to use as much of the common resource as possible. But this results in the tragedy. The resource is overused and becomes unsustainable. And then no one gets to use it because everyone overused it. Fisheries are a classic example. Initially, everyone benefits if fisheries are fished aggressively. Individual fishermen can get more catch, and consumers get more delicious seafood. But if fisheries are overburdened, preventing future generations of fish from being born and reproducing, then the ecosystem dies out and there are no longer any fish. This is why we have rules of the road to ensure fisheries can be sustained, not just for today, but for tomorrow and years down the road. The problem arises when a bad actor ignores the maritime stop signs and red lights that society has set up. And that's what's happening today. Bad actors around the world in both international and sovereign waters are fishing without proper regulatory approval, failing to report their catch, sailing with improper vessels, and often utilizing illegal or even forced laborers. The countries engaging in this illegal, unreported, and unregulated, or the IUU, fishing at scale here are exactly who you would expect them to be. The IUU Fishing Risk Index ranks China as the country with the worst record in the world on this. Iran is second. Russia is fourth. These countries who ignore international norms in high-profile ways also ignore them in lower-profile ones. Countries with the societal infrastructure to sell or buy illicit energy products via a shadow fleet can also utilize shadow fleets to illegally fish. China has trawlers sailing around the world into other countries, sovereign waters, and then illegally taking countries' own natural resources. These countries are at best unable to do anything about their IUU fishers. More likely, they are unwilling. These bad actors are destroying fisheries for all the good faith actors in the world. And many of the people that will be hit the hardest are small fishing communities in developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These countries rely on the ocean's bounty to feed and fund their communities. The theory of my bill is simple. We need a stick to punish the bad actors who are creating the tragedy of the commons and fisheries around the world. By pushing hard-hitting sanctions on these bad actors, we will make it more difficult for them to sell their illegal loot and give criminals a second thought about engaging in illegal fishing in the first place. So I want to thank Rep. Kim for co-leading this bill, as well as others like Congressman Scott Peters and Senator Tom Kaine and others leading similar legislative charges to address the IUU fishing more aggressively. This is a global problem that needs America's leadership. And this is a bill that is a major step in the right direction. Therefore, I urge all of my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Ranking member yields back. Representative Kim is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I am speaking in favor of H.R. 6338, the Stop Illegal Fishing Act, and I'm proud to co-lead this bill with Ranking Member Mix. Thank you. This important legislation is long overdue, and it sends a clear message. The United States will not tolerate the predatory maritime behavior that has become a trademark of the Chinese Communist Party's global strategy. The world's largest perpetrator of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is the People's Republic of China. Chinese vessels often operate without regard to environmental, economic, legal, or labor considerations, with crews under conditions that amount to modern-day slavery. Consequently, they devastate ecosystems, damage a primary source of income for developing nations, and trespass into other nations' exclusive economic zones. This is not just about overfishing, it is about coercion. The CCP illegitimately asserts de facto control over disputed waters and normalizes maritime aggression under the disguise of commercial fishing. It is economic warfare disguised as fishing, which threatens the integrity of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The Stop Illegal Fishing Act confronts this problem head-on. It establishes a targeted sanctions program against IUU perpetrators and expands interagency tools to expose and penalize the enablers of this illicit behavior. A rules-based maritime order in the Indo-Pacific is essential to American prosperity and freedom for our friends and allies. I look forward to getting this important legislation across the finish line, and I urge all members to support this bipartisan legislation. With that, I yield back.
Representative yields back. Do any other members seek recognition? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I fully support the Meeks bill, co-sponsored by our distinguished ranking member, or chairwoman, I should say, Young Kim, on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, H.R. 6638. Mr. Chairman, in October of 2023, as chairman of the Commission, Congressional Executive Commission on China, I chaired a hearing entitled How Forced Labor in China Taints America's Seafood Supply Chain. It coincided with the release of Ian Urbina's groundbreaking study, a 4-year study, and many of his investigators faced great risks in reporting and doing the due diligence that they did, and it broke the story about how China's fleet is filled to overflowing with forced labor. Matter of fact, he testified that of the 357 of the 751 ships that deal with squid, half had serious problems with forced labor. And that's just the ones that they studied. There are even more, but it was an amazing study. On the fishing boats, as well as in processing plants, China uses forced labor to undersell competitors. Of course they do. They have forced labor. They have very small amounts of costs associated with the people around the ships. And on the open seas, cut off from contact with land, harsh and very cruel punishment is meted out to laborers who are treated as slaves. Wages are withheld. Captive peoples, especially the Uyghurs, are often conscripted onto these boats. On land, North Korean women are exploited to process these fish. This also has national security implications because Kim Jong-un's regime is paid a price per head for supplying these North Korean laborers, funds that he then uses, obviously, for his military machine. And here is the kicker. The United States government has been subsidizing this barbaric behavior. One of the takeaways from our hearing and ongoing reach out to the administration, both the Biden administration and now the Trump administration, is that many of our laws are being broken, current laws, with this, and we're buying for our commissaries, DOD, the VA, the Department of Agriculture. They are going with best price, and so often the fish that lands in those commissaries is tainted with forced labor. I have written to every secretary a number of times in the last administration and in this, saying we've got to stop our complicity with this forced labor and the purchase and procurement of those products because they are made with that, with forced labor. This implicates that at least three U.S. laws are potentially violated right now. This will add another layer, I believe, and I'm for it totally, including the Tariff Act, which prohibits goods made with slave or forced labor from being imported into the United States, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which applies to conscripted forced Uyghur labor, and Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, which covers North Korean laborers. I, along with, again, my colleagues on the commission, we continue to write and ask and call and admonish that they stop our complicity in this, and I do hope that this legislation passes, because this will be another layer of us telling the administration to stop it. Yield back.
Representative yields back. There being no further discussion of the bill, the committee will move for consideration of amendments. Does any member wish to offer an amendment? There being no amendments, I move the committee report H.R. 6338 to the House with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. A roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed. The committee will stand in recess. The clerk will email member offices regarding the timing of committee votes. We are in recess.